The words stung like a slap across the face. "You're too old to travel with us, Grandma," Sophie had said, her 14-year-old voice sharp with the casual cruelty of youth. Margaret, 70 years young, stood frozen in her cozy living room, the family's annual camping trip itinerary clutched in her trembling hands. She had been planning this trip for months, her heart alight with the prospect of guiding her grandchildren, Sophie and 16-year-old Ethan, through the same forest trails she'd wandered as a girl. The Smoky Mountains, with their whispering pines and hidden waterfalls, had always been her sanctuary. But now, as Sophie's words echoed, joined by Ethan's muttered, "Yeah, you just slow us down," Margaret felt the weight of her age like never before. Her daughter, Claire, tried to soften the blow. "Mom, they're just kids. They don't mean it," she said, her voice laced with guilt as she packed the cooler. But Margaret saw the truth in Claire's eyes. She agreed with them. The family didn't want her on this adventure. They saw her as fragile, a relic better left at home with her knitting and tea. The rejection burned, but Margaret swallowed it, forcing a smile. "I'll be fine here," she lied, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "You all go have fun." That night, alone in her quiet house, Margaret sat by the window, staring at the stars. The kids' words replayed in her mind, each syllable a dagger. Too old. Too slow. She thought of her late husband, Tom, who'd always called her his wild wanderer. They'd hiked those mountains together, laughed under starlit skies, and promised to never let age dim their spirits. Was she betraying that promise now? By midnight, a spark ignited within her. Margaret stood, her joints creaking but her resolve ironclad. She wouldn't let their words define her. She pulled her old hiking boots from the closet, dusted off her backpack, and began to pack. If they thought she was too old, she'd show them just how wrong they were. At dawn, Margaret left a note on the kitchen table, "Gone to the Smokies. Don't worry. I'll see you there." She drove alone, the winding roads familiar yet thrilling, her heart pounding with a mix of defiance and fear. The campground was a 5-hour drive, and she arrived just as the sun crested the mountains, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. She parked a mile from the family's designated site, wanting to approach on foot, to feel the earth beneath her boots. The forest welcomed her like an old friend. The scent of pine and damp earth filled her lungs, and memories of Tom flooded back his hand in hers, his laughter echoing through the trees. She hiked steadily, her pace slower than in her youth, but fueled by a fire she hadn't felt in years. By noon, she reached the family's campsite, her breath heavy but her spirit soaring. Claire's jaw dropped when she saw her mother emerge from the trail, backpack slung over her shoulders, her silver hair glinting in the sunlight. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she gasped, rushing forward. Sophie and Ethan, lounging by the fire pit, froze, their eyes wide with shock. "I'm here to camp," Margaret said simply, dropping her pack with a thud. "You said I was too old, but I reckon I've got a few trails left in me." Ethan stammered. "But, Grandma, we didn't mean." Margaret held up a hand, her gaze steady. "You meant it. And that's okay. Words can hurt, but they can also light a fire. So here I am." Claire's face softened, torn between pride and worry. "Mom, this is crazy. The trails are tough. And you're 70. Margaret finished, her voice firm. "Not dead. Not frail. And not staying home while you all have the adventure of a lifetime." The kids exchanged guilty glances, but Margaret didn't linger on their discomfort. She unpacked her tent, her movements deliberate, and set it up with the precision of someone who'd done it 100 times. The family watched in silence, the air thick with unspoken apologies. That evening, as the campfire crackled, Margaret shared stories of her adventures with Tom, tales of getting lost in a storm, of finding hidden caves, of sleeping under a sky so clear it felt like the stars were within reach. Sophie, usually glued to her phone, listened raptly, her earlier sharpness replaced by curiosity. Ethan, who'd barely spoken to Margaret in months, asked, "Did you ever get scared out here, Grandma?" "Plenty," she admitted, her eyes glinting. "But fear's just a signal you're alive. You push through it, and that's where the magic happens." By the second day, Margaret led the family on a trail she'd hiked decades ago, her steps sure despite the steep incline. Claire hovered nervously, but Margaret waved her off. "I know my limits," she said, though her aching knees begged to differ. She wouldn't let them see her falter. Sophie, trailing behind, whispered to Ethan, "I didn't know Grandma was like this." Ethan nodded, his usual teenage aloofness giving way to a flicker of respect. That night, a storm rolled in, sudden and fierce. The wind howled, and rain battered the tents. Claire panicked, shouting for everyone to secure their gear. Margaret, calm amidst the chaos, directed the kids to tie down the tarps, her voice cutting through the storm's roar. When a branch crashed near Sophie's tent, Margaret was there in an instant, pulling her granddaughter to safety, her strength surprising them both. As the storm passed, the family huddled in Margaret's tent, soaked but safe. Sophie, shivering, mumbled, "I'm sorry, Grandma. I shouldn't have said, you know." Margaret squeezed her hand. "You're young. You'll learn. Family's about forgiveness, not perfection." By morning, the forest was reborn, glistening with dew. Margaret stood at the edge of the campsite, watching the sunrise. She'd proven her point not just to them, but to herself. She wasn't too old. She was Margaret, the wild wanderer, and no one could take that from her. The sunrise painted the smoky mountains in shades of amber and rose, and Margaret breathed deeply, the crisp air filling her with a renewed sense of purpose. She'd shown her family she could keep up, but the real challenge lay ahead, a 3-day trek to Ravens Falls, a hidden gem she and Tom had discovered decades ago. The trail was rugged, with steep climbs and narrow paths, and she knew Claire would try to talk her out of it. Sure enough, as the family ate breakfast oatmeal cooked over the campfire, Claire broached the subject. "Mom, you made your point yesterday," she said, stirring her coffee nervously. "But Ravens Falls, that's a tough hike, even for us. Maybe you should stay at camp." Margaret's eyes twinkled with defiance. "Claire, I've hiked that trail before you were born. I'm going." Her tone left no room for argument, though her daughter's worried frown tugged at her heart. Sophie, picking at her oatmeal, glanced up. "Can I go with you, Grandma?" Her voice was tentative, as if testing the waters. Ethan, still quiet from yesterday's guilt, added, "Me too. I mean, if you're okay with it." Margaret's heart swelled. "I'd love the company," she said, her smile warm but firm. "But you'll need to keep up with me." The kids chuckled, the tension easing, and Claire sighed, relenting. "Fine, but I'm coming too. Someone's got to make sure you all don't get lost." The trail to Ravens Falls began gently, winding through meadows dotted with wildflowers. Margaret led the way, her walking stick tapping a steady rhythm against the earth. She pointed out landmarks, a gnarled oak where she and Tom had carved their initials, a stream where they'd once caught trout with their bare hands. The kids listened, their usual impatience replaced by fascination. As the path grew steeper, Margaret's pace slowed, her breath coming harder. She felt Claire's eyes on her, watching for signs of weakness. But Margaret pressed on, her determination outweighing the ache in her hips. She wouldn't let them see her as fragile, not now, not ever. By midday, they reached a rocky outcrop overlooking a valley. The view was breathtaking, the mountains stretching endlessly before them. But Ethan's face fell. "This is cool, but is it worth it? My legs are killing me." Margaret knelt beside him, her voice soft but fierce. Worth it. This is life. Ethan. Every step. Every it cheats proof you're here. Feeling the world. Don't you dare give up on that. He nodded, chastened, and they continued. Sophie, usually glued to her phone, tucked it away and started asking Margaret about her childhood adventures. Did you and Grandpa ever fight out here? She asked, her curiosity genuine. Oh, plenty. Margaret laughed. Once, he got us so lost we slept in a cave. I was furious, but by morning, we were laughing about it. That's what love does, it turns fights into stories. The day wore on, and the trail grew treacherous. A narrow ledge forced them to sidle along a cliff face. The drop below dizzying. Claire gripped Sophie's hand, her face pale, but Margaret moved with a quiet confidence, her years of experience guiding her steps. When Ethan slipped on loose gravel, Margaret's hand shot out, steadying him. Easy. Now, she said, her voice calm. 1 foot at a time. By dusk, they reached a clearing to camp for the night. The kids were exhausted, their faces streaked with dirt, but their eyes shone with pride. They'd made it this far because of Margaret, and they knew it. As they set up their tents, Sophie hugged her grandmother tightly. You're amazing, Grandma, she whispered. Margaret hugged her back, her throat tight. So are you, kiddo. So are you. That night, as the family sat around the campfire, Claire raised her tin mug. To Mom, she said, her voice thick with emotion, for reminding us what strength looks like. Margaret smiled, but her thoughts drifted to Tom. She felt him in the rustle of the leaves, the crackle of the fire. This trip wasn't just about proving herself, it was about honoring the life they'd built, the love that still guided her. As the stars emerged, Margaret lay in her tent, her body aching but her spirit alight. She'd shown her family she was more than too old. Tomorrow, they'd reach Raven's Falls, and she'd show them something even greater, the beauty of a life fully lived. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of Raven's Falls. Margaret woke before the others, her body stiff but her heart eager. She stepped outside her tent, watching the mist curl through the trees, and felt a quiet thrill. Today, she'd lead her family to the waterfall she and Tom had cherished, a place where the world felt infinite. As the family packed up, Ethan grumbled about his sore muscles, but a glance from Margaret silenced him. You'll thank me when you see the falls, she said, her tone light but firm. Sophie, now fully invested, helped Margaret fold the tents, her chatter filling the silence. Grandma, how'd you and Grandpa find this place anyway? Margaret's eyes softened. We got lucky. Got lost. Actually, stumbled on it during a storm, and it felt like the mountain was sharing a secret with us. She didn't mention how she and Tom had stood under the falls, soaked and laughing, promising to return every year. Some memories were too sacred to share. The trail grew wilder, roots twisting across the path, rocks jutting like jagged teeth. Claire's worry resurfaced, her voice tight. Mom, this is getting dangerous. Are you sure about this? Margaret met her daughter's gaze, her expression unyielding. I'm sure. Trust me. The path demanded focus, and Margaret's steady presence anchored the group. She pointed out safe footholds, warned of loose stones, and shared tricks for navigating the terrain. Ethan, who'd started the trip sullen, now watched her with quiet awe, mimicking her careful steps. Sophie, emboldened, scampered ahead, only to double back when Margaret called her name. By noon, the roar of the falls reached them, a distant thunder that quickened their pulses. The trail opened to a clearing, and there it was, Raven's Falls, a cascade of silver water tumbling over a cliff, catching the sunlight in a prism of mist. Sophie gasped, and Ethan let out a low whistle. Claire's eyes glistened, her hand finding Margaret's. You were right, Mom. This is incredible. Margaret stood still, her heart aching with joy and loss. She could almost see Tom beside her, his grin wide as he splashed her under the falls. She blinked back tears, focusing on the present. "Let's get closer," she said, leading them to the base of the falls. The spray was cold, invigorating, and the kids laughed as they splashed each other, their earlier doubts forgotten. Margaret joined them, letting the water soak her clothes, her laughter mingling with theirs. For a moment, time dissolved. She was young again, wild and free, with her family by her side. But the moment was fleeting. As they climbed back to the clearing, Sophie slipped on wet rocks, her ankle twisting with a sickening crack. She cried out, crumpling to the ground. Claire rushed to her, panic etched on her face. "Sophie, oh God, are you okay?" Margaret knelt beside her granddaughter, her hands steady as she checked the injury. "It's a sprain, not a break," she said, her voice calm despite the fear in Sophie's eyes. "We'll need to stabilize it and get her back to camp." Using her scarf and a stick, Margaret fashioned a makeshift splint, her movements practiced from years of hiking mishaps. She guided Ethan to help carry Sophie, instructing him on how to support her weight. Claire, shaken, followed Margaret's lead, her trust in her mother absolute. The journey back was slow, the trail unforgiving. Margaret took point, clearing branches and calling out hazards, her strength unwavering despite her own fatigue. Ethan, carrying Sophie's backpack, said quietly, "Grandma, you're like a superhero." Margaret chuckled, though her chest tightened. "Just stubborn, Ethan. Comes with age." By dusk, they reached the campsite, Sophie limping but safe. Claire bandaged her ankle properly, using the first aid kit Margaret had insisted on packing. As night fell, the family sat quietly, the weight of the day settling over them. Sophie, resting against Margaret, whispered, "I'm glad you came. Grandma, I was so wrong." Margaret kissed her forehead. "We all make mistakes. Sweetheart, what matters is what we do next." As the fire died down, Margaret felt a shift in the familiar new respect, a deeper bond. She'd brought them to Raven's Falls, not just to see its beauty, but to show them the strength of love, resilience, and forgiveness. Tomorrow, they'd face the journey home. But tonight, they were together, and that was enough. The campfire's embers glowed faintly as the family settled into their tents, the forest whispering around them. Margaret lay awake, Sophie's words echoing in her mind. "I'm glad you came, Grandma." The apology had soothed the sting of rejection, but a deeper question lingered. Had she pushed herself too far? Her body ached, her knees protesting every step of the day's trek. Yet the fire in her heart burned brighter than ever. Morning brought a new challenge. Sophie's ankle, though stabilized, meant she couldn't walk far. Claire suggested cutting the trip short, her voice heavy with worry. "We should head back to the car today. Sophie needs a doctor. And Mom, you've done enough." Margaret shook her head. "We're not quitting. Sophie can rest here with you, and I'll take Ethan to the Ridge Trail. It's an easy loop, and he deserves to see it." Her tone was firm, but her eyes softened as she looked at her daughter. "I'm not fragile, Claire. Let me do this." Ethan, overhearing, perked up. "I'm in, Grandma. Let's go." His eagerness surprised Claire, who relented with a sigh. "Just be careful, okay?" The Ridge Trail was less demanding, a gentle climb through pine groves to a lookout with a view of the Smokies' rolling peaks. Margaret and Ethan set out, the morning sun warm on their backs. Ethan, usually reserved, opened up as they walked. "Grandma, why do you love this so much?" "Hiking. I mean, it's hard." Margaret smiled, adjusting her pack. "It's not just hiking. It's feeling the world, really feeling it. The ground under your feet, the wind in your face. It reminds you you're part of something bigger. She paused, her voice softening. Your grandpa taught me that. Every trail we took was a promise to keep living, no matter what. Ethan nodded, his face thoughtful. I wish I'd known him better. You do, Margaret said, touching his shoulder. He's in you your curiosity, your stubborn streak. He'd be proud of you. The trail opened to the ridge, and the view stole their bray of the sea of green peaks under an endless blue sky. Ethan grinned, snapping photos with his phone, his earlier complaints forgotten. Margaret watched him, her heart full. This was why she'd comatose share moments like this, to bridge the gap between generations. But the return trip tested their bond. A sudden fog rolled in, thick and disorienting, turning the trail into a maze. Margaret's instincts kicked in, her years of hiking guiding her. Stay close, Ethan, she said, her voice steady. We follow the markers and keep calm. Ethan's bravado faded, his eyes wide with unease. What if we get lost? Grandma. We won't, she promised, though her own heart raced. She taught him to look for trailblazes, to listen for the stream that ran parallel to the path. Step by step, she kept him focused, her calm anchoring his fear. Hours later, they emerged from the fog, the campsite in sight. Claire rushed to them, relief flooding her face. I was so worried. The fog came out of nowhere. Ethan hugged her, then turned to Margaret. Grandma got us through. She's awesome. Margaret laughed, brushing off the praise, but the words warmed her. That evening, as they ate dinner, Sophie hobbled over, her ankle improving. Tell me about the ridge, she begged, and Ethan launched into the story, his admiration for Margaret clear. As night fell, Claire pulled Margaret aside. Mom, I'm sorry I doubted you. You're stronger than all of us. Margaret squeezed her hand. I just wanted to show you all what's possible. Age doesn't define you, your choices do. The family slept soundly, the forest a quiet guardian. Margaret dreamed of Tom, his voice clear, keep wandering. My love. She woke with a smile, ready for the next day's journey, knowing she'd already given her family something priceless, a reminder to never underestimate the power of love and resilience. Dawn broke softly. The Smoky Mountains bathed in a gentle glow. Margaret rose early, her body protesting but her spirit unyielding. Today was their last full day in the forest, and she had one final destination in Minda, a hidden meadow Tom had called their secret haven. She wanted her family to see it, to feel the peace it had always brought her. Sophie's ankle was better, but she still needed to take it easy. Margaret proposed a compromise, a short, flat trail to the meadow, manageable for everyone. Claire hesitated, her protective instincts flaring. But Ethan's enthusiasm, come on, Mom, it's Grandma's trip, swayed her. Sophie, eager to join, promised to lean on her brother for support. The trail was gentle, winding through ferns and wildflowers, the air alive with birdsong. Margaret walked beside Sophie, steadying her when the path grew uneven. This place, she said, her voice soft, was where your grandpa proposed. He got down on one knee right in that meadow, clumsy as anything, and I said yes before he finished asking. Sophie's eyes sparkled. That's so romantic. Grandma, do you miss him? Every day, Margaret admitted, her smile bittersweet. But places like this, they keep him close. The meadow came into view, a sea of green framed by towering pines, sunlight dancing on the grass. The family stopped, awestruck. Claire spread a blanket, and they sat together, sharing sandwiches and stories. Ethan, inspired, asked Margaret to teach him how to identify plants. And soon they were combing the meadow, Margaret pointing out edible berries and medicinal herbs. As the afternoon waned, a shadow crossed Claire's face. Mom, I've been thinking, we've been so caught up in our lives. We forgot how much you have to offer. I'm sorry we made you feel left out. Margaret's throat tightened. It's not about blame, Claire. It's about remembering we're family. We lift each other up, no matter how old or young. The kids nodded, their faces serious. Sophie, leaning against Margaret, said, I want to be like you when I'm older, not scared of anything. Margaret chuckled. Oh, I'm scared plenty. But courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about moving forward anyway. As evening approached, they headed back to camp, the meadow's peace lingering in their hearts. But the forest had one last test. A fallen tree blocked the trail, its massive trunk too high to climb over easily. Claire panicked, but Margaret assessed it calmly. We'll go around, she said, leading them through a dense thicket. The detour was tough, branches snagging their clothes. But Margaret's confidence kept them steady. She showed Ethan how to use a stick to check for hidden roots, and helped Sophie navigate the uneven ground. When they finally reached the campsite, the family collapsed in relief, laughing at their disheveled state. That night, around the campfire, the family shared a closeness they hadn't felt in years. Ethan, usually guarded, opened up about his fears of starting high school. Sophie admitted she'd been jealous of her friends' cool grandparents who traveled the world. Margaret listened, offering quiet wisdom, her presence a bridge between their worlds. As the fire died, Claire hugged her mother tightly. You've given us more than a trip, Mom. You've given us you. Margaret smiled, her eyes misty. That's all I ever wanted. In her tent, Margaret lay awake, the meadow's memory warming her. She'd honored Tom's legacy, not just by sharing his places, but by teaching their family to see beyond age, to embrace adventure and love. Tomorrow, they'd pack up and head home. But the real journey, the one of hearts and bonds, had already changed them forever. The final morning in the Smoky Mountains dawned with a quiet beauty, the sky a canvas of soft pinks and purples. Margaret packed her gear slowly, savoring the weight of her backpack, the feel of the forest air. Today, they'd return home, but she felt a shift in her familiar newfound respect, a deeper love that made every ache worthwhile. As they broke camp, Ethan took charge, folding tents with a precision Margaret hadn't seen in him before. Sophie, her ankle improving, insisted on carrying her own pack, her face set with determination. Claire watched her children, then turned to Margaret. You've changed them, Mom. I didn't realize how much they needed you. Margaret smiled, brushing off the praise. They just needed a nudge. We all do sometimes. The hike back to the car was bittersweet. The trail felt familiar now, its challenges less daunting. Margaret led the way, her steps slower but steady, her heart full. The kids chattered about the trip, Ravens Falls, the foggy ridge, the meadow, each memory a thread weaving them closer. Halfway to the parking lot, a steep descent tested their resolve. Sophie, still limping slightly, hesitated at the edge. I don't know if I can do this, Grandma, she said, her voice small. Margaret knelt beside her, her eyes warm. You can. One step at a time. With me. She held Sophie's hand, guiding her down, their pace slow but sure. Ethan followed, carrying both their packs, his earlier complaints replaced by quiet strength. At the bottom, Claire hugged them all, tears in her eyes. I'm so proud of you, she said, her gaze lingering on Margaret. All of you. The drive home was quiet, the car filled with the soft hum of exhaustion and contentment. Margaret stared out the window, the mountains fading in the distance. She thought of Tom, of their promises to keep exploring, to keep loving. She'd kept those promises, not just for herself, but for her family. Back home, the kids begged to see Margaret's old photo albums, eager for more stories of her adventures with Tom. They sat around her living room, the same room where Sophie's cruel words had sparked this journey. Now, laughter filled the space as Margaret recounted tales of getting stuck in mud, outrunning a bear, and dancing under the stars. Ethan, flipping through a faded album, paused at a photo of Margaret and Tom at Ravens Falls. Young and radiant. "You were so cool, Grandma," he said, his voice soft. "You still are?" Margaret's heart swelled. "You're pretty cool yourself, kid." That night, Claire stayed after the kids went to bed, helping Margaret unpack. "Mom, I was wrong to let them talk you out of this trip," she said, her voice thick. "I should have stood up for you." Margaret squeezed her hand. "You're standing up now? That's what matters." As Claire left, Margaret sat by the window, the stars bright above. She felt Tom's presence, his voice a whisper in her heart. "You did good, wild wanderer." She smiled, knowing she'd given her family more than an adventurist, given them a legacy of courage, love, and the will to keep going, no matter the odds. The morning after their return, Margaret woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of laughter. She shuffled into her kitchen to find Sophie and Ethan at the table, plotting next year's camping trip. Claire, flipping pancakes, shot her a grin. "They haven't stopped talking about the Smokies. Mom, you've created monsters." Margaret laughed, her heart light. "Good. The world needs more adventurers." Over breakfast, the family made plans not just for another trip, but for more time together. Sophie suggested a weekly hike, even if it's just the park, and Ethan volunteered to help Margaret digitize her old photos. Claire, watching her kids, said, "I want in too. Maybe we can all learn from you, Mom." The days that followed felt different. Sophie called to share school stories, her voice free of its earlier edge. Ethan stopped by to mow Margaret's lawn, staying to hear tales of Tom's fishing mishaps. Claire invited her mother to dinner, no longer treating her like a fragile guest, but a vital part of their lives. One evening, Margaret found Sophie's journal on the couch, left open to a page titled Grandma's Lessons. It read, "Grandma's not just old, strong, brave, and kind of a badass. She taught me to keep going, even when I'm scared. I want to be like her." Margaret's eyes misted as she closed the journal, her heart full. Weeks later, the family gathered for a small hike in a local park, a warm-up for next summer's adventure. Margaret led the way, her walking stick a familiar companion. The kids raced ahead, then circled back, their energy infectious. Claire walked beside her, their steps in sync. "You've given us something special, Mom," she said. "Not just the trip, but us, this family." Margaret nodded, her throat tight. "That's all I ever wanted." As they reached a clearing, the kids ran to a stream, splashing and laughing. Margaret watched, her heart echoing with memories of Tom. She'd honored him, not by clinging to the past, but by building a future where their love lived on in their family's laughter, their courage, their bond. The sun set, casting a golden glow over the scene. Margaret stood tall, her silver hair catching the light, her spirit as wild as ever. She wasn't too old not for adventure, not for love, not for life. And as her family called her to join them, she knew they'd never doubt her again.